Good morning. Recording. Good morning, everybody. This is Senate Agricultural Committee, Friday, April 8th. And this is a little strange. The chair is at another meeting, so I will chair on Zoom with our good friends in the room. So we'll see how we can pull that off. Our first discussion today is with Ryan Patch from the Agency of Ag. And Ryan, there we are. We're talking about H466, which is a bill we don't have, although we anticipate having next week. This is a surface water, sometimes called the surface water bill. Ryan, have you been working with Senate Natural, and can you tell us any update? We'll hand it to you, but I think our committee is interested in, has been watching the impact potential for farmers, and so we'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Senator. For the record, Ryan Patch with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. As you're well aware, H466 did pass the House. It is in Senate Natural Resources and Energy, and they have been holding testimonial hearings over the past 2 to 3 weeks and have proposed some amendments to H466, which is responsive to some of the testimony that was provided by farmers and other interested and future impacted entities to the bill. If you want a summary of that, I bet you have to talk to Mr. O'Grady on where the current drafts are. But the Agency of Ag has been in there and been providing testimony on H466 and sharing its comments on how we think the bill could be made better and more workable for farmers that would fall under the requirements for either the registration reporting program or the future permit program that is currently proposed in the bill.
Okay. Seems straightforward. Committee, any questions? What do we? Anybody?
Well, I would ask Brian, in terms of the possible amendments that the Senate Natural Resources Committee is considering, is there a way you can describe some of those and which ones may be most helpful to farmers? No, helpful is the right way, but maybe more appealing to farmers.
Perhaps responsive. Yes, farmers have been in their lodging general searching for the term where you don't agree with what's in the bill, not supporting it, opposing it, feeling that there's going to be a burden and cost imposed for some of the requirements that were in H466 as passed by the House. There has been an amendment put forward by the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Energy to seek to address one of those underlying concerns about withdrawal requirements and what thresholds do you hit, and would agriculture need to install a meter to track those impacts. And I think that the bill is a better place. Yesterday, there's, I think, going to be another amendment which may be less in line with what the farmers would like to see as far as a withdrawal threshold that would trigger them coming under the registration and reporting portion of the bill. And the agency did provide testimony that, requiring a meter for something that can be tracked with records is definitely an economic impact. And we think good data could be achieved through record keeping that farmers may keep for any irrigation they may use on their fields. Again, that's one of the objections, or I guess critiques, that were raised by the farmers. And I don't think the bill's fully there yet, though the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Energy has been responsive and seeking to address some of that farmer to address that farmer testimony. Whether the farmers think it's there or not, I think there's still a bit of daylight.
Sarah Caldmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We heard testimony yesterday from Joe Tisbett from the Vermont Farm Bureau. I'm wondering if they testified in the House. His concerns centered around the cost of the meters that farmers would have to purchase. And we're not talking about 10 or 20 bucks. We're talking about thousands of dollars worth of equipment that would keep track of all of this. So I'm wondering whether the Vermont Farm Bureau had any testimony. The other sort of segment, even though it falls outside of our jurisdiction, are golf courses, I think. And did the House have any testimony with respect to those guys?
Thanks for the question, Senator Colin Moore. To answer your question, there's been, so yes, as passed by the House, right? The House bill includes a metering requirement for daily withdrawals of 50,000 gallons or more, as I read the bill. And to your point, metering is expensive. That was a concern the Agency of Ag raised in the study committee. The report went out with that recommendation in it. The Senate committee has heard that, and the most recent amendment proposed by the Senate Committee on Natural Resources includes an estimate based on record keeping would be the summary for farming. And so that would address that portion of the concern. The other is, at what threshold would a farm need to do the registration and reporting for the bill, which some farmers feel is quite low of a threshold. And so the second part of your question about other sectors or industries that have provided testimony raising concerns or opposition to the bill, the Vermont Associated General Contractors raised concern about the fact that state and federal highway transportation programs. Sorry, I'm summarizing, this is my area of expertise, but what I understand it to be is, you're required to use water to keep dust down, or it's needed for other parts of infrastructure, and so they were concerned this would be a burden. It does appear there is a specific general permit option that was proposed by the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Energy for that use in the bill, just for state or municipal infrastructure projects. And then, yes, the other one of the other groups that provided testimony raising concerns was the golf course superintendents. Raised some questions about, they have their own ponds and do a lot of irrigating, and so it definitely could impact them. And then, yes, the first day testimony, I believe, have to check the records. I believe Jackie Folsom from the Farm Bureau provided testimony articulating to the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Energy that, you probably want to hear from farmers on this because they didn't really provide testimony or didn't have an opportunity to provide testimony on the House side before H.466 was passed. And so farmers have definitely been invited by the committee that currently has H.466, the Senate Natural Resources.
Thank you, Ryan. As I understand it, you have, maybe personally, but the agency and ANR have been working closely to come to a solution on this. And I'm sometimes critical of the intersection of the agencies, so I want to take a moment and say thank you for that. Is the bill something, does the agency have a position
on the bill?
Yeah. Or are you waiting for machinations or what?
Yes, I think the agency, as passed by the House, doesn't support H.466. There are ways to amend the bill to make it workable for agriculture, acknowledging that agriculture is currently regulated for surface water withdrawals. Right? You can't just use as much as you want. You have to make sure your withdrawal is responsive to the stream flow. And so definitely support research to better understand usage and ensuring that a permit program continues current state policy where if you're withdrawing surface water and you're not causing an impact, you're allowed to use that water, is something that we think is important to include in the bill and would need to be included so the agency could support it. So we're working to get to those points. 2 out of the 3 of the agency's major concerns have been addressed. Time is limited, and so we haven't really dug into some of the permit condition requirements, right? That's being established in this bill. And so there is opportunity to discuss on some of those, requirements and how they may apply to agriculture about, having to do an alternatives analysis or, we haven't gone to that level of detailed discussion, but do think it would be important to discuss, which it could be impacting the permit program development. But we've had three big objections, and two of the three have been, I think, addressed within the latest draft that we've seen from Senate Natural Resources and Energy.
Great, thank you. And Senator Collmore.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is, and it's probably not for you, Ryan, because it's probably more of a policy question than anything else, but I'm trying to understand where there's a problem currently in the state of Vermont regarding this issue. I mean, if it exists, I certainly am not aware of it from any emails or contacts I've had with anyone. We live in what I think Senator Pearson correctly called sort of a wet area. I mean, it rains quite a bit here in Vermont, even though if you take a look at the state, and I think Joe mentioned this yesterday, the northern part of the state last year had a little bit less rain than the middle part, and certainly a lot less than the southern part. We had a lot of rainfall last summer. So I guess I'm trying to understand, is there a problem? How did the agency flag this as an issue and sort of request that we take a look at it? Or I know out west in some of our other states where there, a little more dryness, this could be an issue, but I'm not aware of anything. Have we sucked a pond dry before? Or are we in danger of, where are we, I guess?
Sure. I think that's a great and relevant question with regards to the bill. I'll explain my understanding of the history of how the study committee came to be and the report was issued and where we stand. I do have a half-hour presentation which puts forward the known information about agriculture irrigation withdrawals to provide context for policymakers to answer that question if there's enough information known, if there are issues. I would also suggest, calling in DEC to provide commentary on enforcement or issues they may have noticed with surface water withdrawals. They'd be better positioned to comment on that. As far as how H466 has come to be, my understanding is the interbasin transfer of the Killington-Pico snowmaking thing where they're transferring from the Ottaquechee to the Otter Creek for, Killington's in one place, Pico's in the other watershed, that raised concerns amongst a number of environmental groups. The bill was introduced either last year or 2 years ago that became Act, whatever the study committee number was, Act 178, I believe. That was first named as the interbasin transfer and just interbasin transfer bill, focusing on that snowmaking, and then surface water got added to that through the committee process, and that was what was passed. And so the study committee looked at both this interbasin transfer question as well as a surface water withdrawal permitting program. 10 meetings, and then the report came out, and now the bill H466 that you see before you, as passed by the House, is mostly in line with what was in that study committee report, and now it's on the Senate side. So that's my understanding of history. It started as interbasin transfer. Let's take a look at surface water withdrawals, and now it's the registration, reporting, and permit program development. That's in the bill at the moment.
Okay, then one of the other questions Joe had yesterday was, assuming this goes forward, and maybe it won't, what are we going to do with the information? Who's going to see the information, and what are we going to do with it? And again, I realize I'm very close to asking policy questions, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Ryan, I really don't. But there's nothing in the bill that suggests what would be happening with those results.
Well, I see, so happy to stay within my lane and answer fact-based questions as best I can. I think I see within the permit program development that the results of the registration and reporting program will work to establish the thresholds for permitting that may be needed. And so, some folks have provided commentary like, well, why are you setting up a permit program when we don't know the results of the research or the registration and reporting? That's one perspective other people have. Others think, we need a permit program. And so we need to put that in law now, and then the registration and reporting information will inform that future permit development. One question I've continued to raise is, currently the state stream flow procedures, as I understand it, if you're withdrawing below the de minimis amount, it's allowed, right? If you're not impacting a stream and withdrawing less than an amount that would impact it even under drought conditions, you're allowed to do that. And we've also heard testimony that there are some smaller watersheds where a one-day withdrawal could really impact the stream. And so I think all that balancing is what's going into discussions around the bill. Like I said, I can provide the data and information I have about agriculture, and policymakers can make the decision. But the way I understand the bill to be structured is you do registration and reporting, and then DEC will use that to develop the requirements of a permit program for surface water withdrawals, excluding snowmaking unless they make a change to their operation.
Thank you.
So you say excluding snowmaking, but that is already regulated and permitted, I believe, right?
It has a rule, not a permit.
Okay.
Is my understanding.
So Ryan, were you part of the working group you mentioned?
Yes, I was Secretary Tebbett's designee to the study committee.
Okay, so you've been at this a while, and but as you said, those recommendations then morphed in the House committee process a little bit, right?
No, I think the recommendations that came out of the study committee were pretty well, where like the draft language that came out, there were minor changes, from my point of view, from what came out of the study committee process to what was passed by H 466.
Okay. Can you, Senator Collmore asked a question that's sort of been on my mind of along the lines of what is the problem we have here? And I guess I'm struck, I think it was last spring, but time is a little mushy. We were just getting deluged with rain here in Chittenden County. And I expressed to somebody relief that we were sort of seeing the end of the drought. And the feedback I got was, no, actually parts of the state are in intense drought, and the rain will be great for the kind of crop uptake because they'll just suck it right out of the soil, but that groundwater levels were quite diminished. And we're hearing now that the snowpack was way less, no surprise, than we need. So we have this paradox, it seems to me. And I would just love to the extent, we see more rain, we see more intense rain events, we see more flooding, and we have parts of the state that are in fact experiencing droughts, even recently. Can you just, it always stretches my imagination. It just doesn't make sense. I'm sort of annually worried about the flooding in my basement. So it shows what I know. But can you just help us understand, like, is that the case? And is it just the situation of topography and watersheds and a great variety, even in our little state, among regions that have a deep impact on water tables? Could you just play that out to the extent you have expertise?
Sure. I opened my presentation touching on climate change and climate impacts, and episodic droughts are predicted to become more common, particularly during the growing months. However, we are expected to get more precipitation. It's been observed we are getting more precipitation. Precipitation, of course, doesn't fall nicely in a nice pitter-patter all over the state. It's localized to certain areas, and sometimes you can have a severe hailstorm in one place and it's bright sunny in another. And I think that's outside of my expertise to comment why, but I think it's certainly anecdotally observed that there's many different impacts. And certainly last year in Franklin County and Grand Isle County, significant drought relative to the southern part of the state. And so climate effects and changes aren't always distributed evenly across the state. And so when climate resilience and climate resilience planning is invoked, I think it's absolutely reasonable to begin to think about how to prepare the state of Vermont and agriculture specifically, right, as my wheelhouse, for future climate effects. And irrigation can certainly be one way to weather those times of drought when you have significant water needs depending on the crop being grown. And so irrigation is certainly a climate resilient practice that could be utilized, and how to store water when we have more than enough, right? We're predicted to get more rain in December and January, and it's predicted to decline on average in the summer months by 2050. And so how does the state engage in planning, and farmers engage in planning to be able to grow productive crops if rain is scarce? Luckily, Vermont receives way more rainfall than many of the Western states that are referenced, 4.2 to 3.6 on average over the past 30 years for monthly rainfall in Montpelier and the Intervale, those two different areas. But so there, and those figures can change depending on what period of months you're looking at. But we generally get sufficient rain. But irrigation is an important component, especially for horticultural crop growers and others that are growing specialty crops that have specific demands of water at different stages of development, and to ensure a good saleable crop. Pretty foods sell, unfortunately, and so irrigation can definitely help produce those foods that look good. So not to ramble on too much, but to acknowledge that yes, climate is changing. We don't always know what those impacts are going to be, and to do some planning, I think, is important. I think how that plays out in H466 is obviously for the committees to determine, but the approach for permitting may not be the most efficacious way to get to resilience planning throughout the state. I think some of the questions about scale and impact, understanding how much water is needed and where it is available, how much is agriculture using relative to other sectors, and what is the current state of water withdrawal policy. I think the Agency of Ag has been trying to call out that the scale of irrigation use in the state is much less and different than many other states, and people presuppose, that there's a large impact, and that certainly can be the case on smaller streams, right? A small stream with a big withdrawal can have a huge and devastating impact on that surface water. However, the current state policy is responsive to that, right? It's all based on the flow or the watershed size. And so if you're in a small watershed, you can't use as much water without needing permission from DEC. And so how to do that balancing in a general permit or in a permit process, I think, is where more conversation could be had to get to some good climate resilience planning that would include agriculture. Agriculture is regulated for surface water withdrawal. So I apologize to ramble on, but trying to connect those things. Yes, climate is changing, and farmers need to be aware of that. And I think generally they are, and the information that was put together from USDA and USGS show generally just well distributed and smaller impacts. Right, 93% of all surface water withdrawers manage between 1 and 9 acres of irrigated cropland. So a lot of very small users, and making sure they're not unfairly burdened when they're not using above an amount that would impact stream flow currently is, I think, one of the objections you'll hear from the farmers themselves at the front of this conversation. I'm not impacting stream flow. Why do I have to do this? Sorry, I don't know if I provided a point there, but just trying to build off some of your questions and comments.
Yeah, and for farmers, they're saying, "Hey, I've been doing this for decades. Now you're bothered by it." I can certainly appreciate that. But one of my questions was, is it true that we can have great variety in drought or flooding conditions across regions, even in our small state?
I would have to, in my opinion, yes. Absolutely. We had very significant drought in Franklin County, sufficient rain in southern part of Vermont just last year.
Yeah.
And definitely depends where you are in the state.
I thank you. You did say that. It's just worth repeating because it's sort of so counterintuitive in a sense. You mentioned irrigation ponds, and I know that's an issue for golf courses and others. Those, I believe, those are not considered surface water, or is that part of what we're part of what amendments are trying to clarify?
That is one of the agency's objections to H466 is how the exemption for constructed farm ponds and irrigation reservoirs for watering livestock and crops was constructed in the original, in the bill passed by the House. I believe, and heard testimony yesterday from DEC, the agency and Ag DEC both support language that would clarify that off-stream reservoirs, constructed farm ponds are sources that when you withdraw from that to irrigate or water your livestock, you don't need to report. If you withdraw from a surface water to put it in there, you absolutely have to report that withdrawal. But if you have a constructed farm pond, that's not a surface water, you may withdraw without registration or reporting. And so that's one of the amendments that's offered, and hopefully that will move forward.
One other question, since I'm not seeing hands, what you've mentioned, if somebody's withdrawing water today and they're impacting the flow of the stream, they do require a permit, right? Just to verify that, is that what you said?
So reading the procedure for determining minimum stream flow, from ANR published in 93 that establishes that de minimis limit. I'm just going to pull up the language to make sure I don't misstate it. Well, I actually don't have, I can pull it up. Anyway, you need permission or a permit from ANR to withdraw above a de minimis amount. Like that's my understanding of what the current state policy is on surface water use from not snowmaking and not public water supplies.
And otherwise, do we have a record at all? I mean, it's my impression we're kind of blind to this practice. Am I right about that?
So you're going to have to ask Jeff Crocker about what DEC knows about surface water withdrawals and requests from agriculture for de minimis determinations, or what to do if it is above de minimis. And so Jeff Crocker from DEC can provide that information. We have a survey from the Ag Statistics Service for, of course, the Ag Census, but also an irrigation survey. Those are both statewide surveys that go to farms and provide, county by county reporting. And so I think that really shows great, good information about what withdrawals are on a county by county basis. People will bring up, but we don't know what's happening in each specific watershed, right? And this question of cumulative effects, you have a lot of users on one stream withdrawing, de minimis amounts of water. Does that impact water quality, stream flow, water quality standards, or whatever? Does that impact the surface water negatively when it reaches the terminus or the mouth and so of the river? And so I think that's one of the questions. You'll hear different sides talking about different reasons why it is happening or not happening. I don't have a good understanding of those watersheds in Vermont that are flow impaired owing to too little water. Again, Jeff Crocker could provide better information about that. So to answer your question, no, it's not well known. However, if there were very significant withdrawals, they would need to go to DEC to get a permit or permission, or they wouldn't be able to, withdraw that water. So there is a structure in place, but there isn't that registration and reporting. And I think that's why some folks want to have the threshold be so low, is so we understand the extent of surface water withdrawal usage in the state. And so a program can be developed to address what issues may exist.
Yeah, interesting. Senator Polina?
Yeah, I have a very basic question. We talk about these issues and these policies and these legislative proposals, and we talk around them, and I always come back to some very basic questions I think we have not answered yet, at least not for me. I mean, if I'm a farmer who's grown 3 acres of vegetables, let's say, how do I estimate how much water I'm using? I mean, I've never had to do this before. I mean, how am I gonna get any ideas how much water I'm using? Without a
You're
meter.
gonna have to, well, you're gonna have to talk to a farmer, right? But you know the pump you purchased, you know how many gallons per minute you get through that pump, and you know how long you run it for, and that's a pretty crude way to get an idea of how much water you've withdrawn. You know, based on soil moisture, you got to estimate, you know, how much you need to add to your crops. And I'm going to run my pump for 3 hours today, and that will give me the, you know, water I need to make sure we get the inch of water a week or whatever we need for our crops. So it obviously is probably much more. I mean, I've probably done a very terrible job of summarizing, and there's many different processes, but I think you can get a very good estimate absent a meter to understand your water usage, because it's expensive. You don't want to run. Moving water is it's really heavy, and it's really expensive, and so people don't want to irrigate when they don't need to, and generally don't need to in Vermont. Of course, that episodic drought's notwithstanding, right? We generally get sufficient rainfall.
So the other question I had, Ryan, was who determines what 30-day period it is?
Going to have to
Can
have
it be
DEC.
Yeah, can it be from
I don't
the
know.
5th of one month to the 5th of the next month, or? I'm not clear as to how that comes about either.
Going to need to ask legislative council or DEC to provide comments on that.
Okay.
That's outside my area of expertise.
Well, already.
Okay, any other questions for Ryan?
Not really.
Well,
I
more,
appreciate it, Ryan. Yeah. No, I'm all set, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Ryan, and don't feel like you didn't do a good job answering the questions. You did. You threaded the needle, as they say, very well.
All right. Thanks for the feedback. I'll do my best.
so I'm sure we will hear from you as we dig in more, but thank you for teeing this up for us. Committee, I suppose. Oh, was that a comment? I guess I'm a little bit in the dark here since I just learned an hour ago that I'd be running the show. So why don't we, Linda, do you have any sense of the chair's timeline this morning?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay. What I would suggest then is that we go on break until 10 o'clock. Does that seem reasonable? I would kind of
Sure.
guess that they've got an hour meeting.
That's fine.
There's nothing else on our agenda. So let's come back at 10 and we'll check in and hopefully the chair is with us. And
Here's what, yeah.
okay, a meeting adjourned. No. Well, all right. Good morning, Mr. Chair. We had a good testimony from Ryan. I think all of us trying to understand the lay of the land a little better and had just finished up questions with him. We're about to take a nice long break until you are.
So I got here just in time for the break.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if you're all planned to go on a break, we better go on a break. I wouldn't want to disappoint anybody.
Well, if you want to give us an update on your meeting, that would be okay too.
Well, what we were talking about in the other room was Carolyn kind of wants to expand and clarify the right to farm language. Pretty much at this point, the way it's sugared off is only dairy guys are the big, are the ones that are being protected. And they, and according to Michael, that's the way he has read things, that's what's going on. And Carolyn wants to get these diversified farms protected to an extent as well from the neighbors, because they're moving in, and a lot of times they're moving in next to the smaller farmers. Because the big farmers, they've already got everything bought up around them for the most part. And so she wanted to add a list of diversified farms that would also be covered under the right to farm law. And so Michael thought it would probably go better in 258, the bill that we sent to Carolyn.
Yeah.
Rather than on 709, I think it is, the bill that we have. The miscellaneous bill. So he's going to draft up some language, and Carolyn's going to look at it, and I guess we could look at it as well, but to see about moving that forward.
Good.
It wasn't that though the bill, that they held a hearing or something about it on in judiciary, right? That's,
Well, the one they had in judiciary was a Senate bill,
right.
and it was gonna take the right of presumption away, and this is just gonna add these other farm operations on to the list that would be protected under the right to farm law to an extent. Whether it's moving later at night or whatever. But some of these guys, like with a wedding barn, on a dirt road 4 miles out, well, neighbors could whine and cry if they have a wedding reception out there and it goes on to 10
The next day.
o'clock.
Yeah.
Then the other issue, and we really didn't talk about it in there, but Corey and I have talked about, is that land up there in Swanton or Highgate, I guess it's Highgate.
Yep.
By the airport, it's as flat as this table, and it's just as sandy as it is flat. And they want to expand the airport, and they want to take some of this land for commercial development, and somebody's promoting that they should pay $200,000 to $300,000 in ag mitigation because they're converting that land that they claim is agricultural, which you couldn't. I don't know what in hell you could grow there. Maybe a little corn on it if you.
With a lot of fertilizer and a lot.
Yeah, if you brought water to it, but it's all sandy soil. And, it's only, an hour's ride, not even an hour's ride across the ferry to Plattsburgh, which would love to grab some of these businesses and probably have a better workforce than we have, and with no hassle to go to the airport. So next week sometime we're gonna have to get into that issue and get some people in here that see if they made whoever's gonna do, who's doing that, the town or?
State's doing it. Attorney Broussard from V-Trans would be the best person.
So we'll get those folks in and see what kind of a burden, they're getting pushed their way. And maybe usually those funds that are picked up they go to Gus Seelick at VHCB. Well, I wouldn't be able to lug the amount of money that we've given him the last year or two for whatever projects. It'd be too heavy unless they could get some $1 million bills, and then I could probably lug it, but I'd hate to have to lug the amount of money we've given him in $100 bills. But anyways, we'll get somebody from VHCB and somebody from the agencies and try to get that resolved, because I think after next week, we may have, I don't know if we'll even have another full week for us to work on stuff, morning committees, so. And Jane was telling us yesterday in approach that there's $70 million more in requests already than what we had money for. And it still rolls in every day. So we're certainly using up a ton of money. So anyways, I guess we'll take a break. And any questions, Chris?
Not yet.
You look healthy enough so you could come to work. This stuff's sitting home every day.
Yeah. I mean, if you
Yeah.
want me to come sit next to you and breathe on you, I guess I'd be open to that, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Where were you sitting before? Every time you exhaled, you looked at me and blew on me.
Well, the good news for you is we believe my kid picked it up Wednesday last week. So that what they tell us is she tested Monday, that she would have been maybe contagious as of Friday is how the school thinks of it. And so that probably means you all were protected, because I would have just been, beginning to catch it from her in that sense, starting Friday. So I don't know.
How's she doing?
She's fine. She was never anything more than a little cough, and she'd had a stuffy nose last weekend and a persistent dry cough, but not anything. I mean, it was so infrequent that even that we were kind of surprised when she tested. When the masks came off, I'm sure other parents will say the same. I mean, all manner of illnesses rocketed around our communities, including some COVID, obviously, and we are seeing a pretty steady uptick. In every day I get an email from the school district that says, this classroom had exposure. It's been steady. I think it's exploding, but it's certainly not zeroing out.
No, and I mean, I carry a mask in my pocket, and I got 3 in the committee room. They're sort of a pain in the butt, but it's a heck of a lot better than sitting home like you've had to do all week.
Yeah. I'd rather be there.
Yeah. Well, we'll take a little break until 10 and then come back.
Okay.
Then you fill me